The stars had been quiet for 3,000 years. High Admiral Vethorin stood on the command bridge of the HFY Eternal Vigilance and watched the endless black through the viewing window that stretched across the entire front of his ship. He was tall for his species, with gray skin that shimmered under the blue lights of the bridge, and 4 eyes that could see things most beings could not. Behind him, hundreds of officers worked at their stations, monitoring the borders of known space. The Galactic Concord had maintained peace for 30 centuries. 12 species had come together after them great wars and formed an alliance that none could challenge. Their combined fleet numbered 4,000 warships, and each one was a masterpiece of destruction. Dreadnoughts that could crack planets, carriers that held thousands of smaller attack craft, destroyers that moved like lightning through the void. No one challenged the Concord. No one dared. Vethorin had served for 200 years, and in all that time, he had never seen true battle. Border skirmishes with pirates. Yes, rebellions on distant colonies that were put down quickly. Certainly, but real war against a worthy enemy had become a thing of legend. Sometimes he wondered if the fleet had grown soft. Sometimes he wondered if they had forgotten what it meant to truly fight. A sharp tone pulled him from his thoughts. Officer Kethril, a young female of the Velis species with bright green scales and nervous eyes, turned from her sensor station with an expression Vethorin had never seen before. Was confusion mixed with something else, something that looked almost like fear. "High Admiral," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Long-range sensors have detected an anomaly in Sector 7-9. Vethorin walked toward her station with slow, measured steps. "Define anomaly." "Officer, a vessel, sir," Kethril replied. "But our systems cannot identify it." "Cannot identify," Vethorin repeated. "The Concord database contains records of every ship ever built by every known species." "Are you telling me this vessel matches nothing?" "Yes, High Admiral. Nothing at all." Vethorin felt something stir in his chest. It was an old feeling, one he had almost forgotten. It was the feeling of the unknown. He leaned over her shoulder and looked at the sensor readings himself. The data made no sense. The vessel was large, perhaps half the size of his own dreadnought, but its shape was unlike anything he had ever seen. Where Concord ships were curved and elegant, this thing was angular and sharp, like it had been built by beings who did not care about beauty, only function, only purpose. Energy signatures radiated from the ship in patterns that their computers could not decode. Where did it come from? Vethorin asked. The Loras claws clicked nervously against her console. "It emerged from the Forbidden Zone, sir." Sector 001. The bridge went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and turned to look at their admiral. The Forbidden Zone was exactly what its name suggested. 3,000 years ago, when the Concord was first formed, the founding members had declared that region of space permanently off limits. The record said it was because of spatial anomalies that made travel dangerous, but there were other records, older ones, buried deep in archives, that most have forgotten existed. Those records spoke of something else. They spoke of a species that had been dealt with, a species that was meant to be gone forever. "Has it responded to automated hails?" Vethorin asked, keeping his voice steady. "No, sir. We have been broadcasting standard greeting protocols on all frequencies. The vessel does not respond. Perhaps their communication systems are incompatible with ours. Perhaps," Kethril said, but her tone suggested she did not believe it. Vethorin straightened and clasped his 4 hands behind his back. "Dispatch a diplomatic envoy to make contact. Send the ambassador's ship along with Defense Squadron 12 as escort. We will learn who these visitors are and what they want." The orders were transmitted immediately, within the hour. Ambassador Silene of the Velith Collective was aboard her personal cruiser, flanked by 50 warships of the Concord Navy. She was old and wise, with scales that had faded to a deep blue with age. And she had negotiated treaties with species that had once sworn eternal hatred for each other. If anyone could establish peaceful first contact, it was her. Veteran watched the squadron depart. On the main display, the unknown vessel continued its steady advance toward Concord space. It did not speed up. It did not slow down. It simply moved forward. With a patience that Vethorin found deeply unsettling, hours passed. The diplomatic squadron reached intercept range and took up positions around the alien ship. Ambassador Selene began her broadcasts. She spoke in every language known to the Concord. She transmitted mathematical sequences that any intelligent species should recognize. She sent images of peace and friendship, symbols that transcended words. The alien vessel gave no response. It continued forward as if the 50 warships surrounding it did not exist. Admiral Officer Kethril said, her voice tight, "The vessel has crossed into sovereign Concord space." Vethorin felt his jaw tightened. This was no longer a matter of curiosity. This was now a matter of law. Open a direct channel to the unknown vessel, he commanded. The communications officer worked quickly, and a moment later, Vethorin heard the soft hum that indicated an open transmission. "Unknown vessel," he said, speaking clearly and slowly. "You have entered the sovereign territory of the Galactic Concord. You have ignored all attempts at peaceful communication. By the authority granted to me as High Admiral of the Concord Fleet, I order you to stop your advance immediately. If you do not comply, we will be forced to interpret your actions as hostile, and we will respond accordingly." He waited. The bridge was so quiet he could hear his own heart beating. 10 seconds passed. 20:30. The alien vessel did not stop it, did not turn it, did not even acknowledge that it had heard him. "Sir," Kethril whispered. "What do we do?" Vethorin stared at the display, at that dark angular shape that moved through the stars, like a predator that had already chosen its prey for the first time in 200 years. He felt something he had thought himself incapable of feeling. He felt afraid, but he was High Admiral of the Galactic Concord, and fear was not something he could show. "Send word to all fleet commanders," he said, and his voice did not waver. "Full mobilization. Every ship we have. We will meet this intruder with the full might of the Concord, and we will learn what it wants." He paused and looked at the dark shape on the screen. One way or another, Ambassador Selene had spent her entire life learning how to speak to those who did not wish to listen. She had ended wars with words alone. She had turned enemies into allies and brought peace to worlds that had known only blood. But as she stood on the bridge of her diplomatic cruiser and stared at the alien vessel through the viewing window, she felt something she had not felt in over a century. She felt helpless. The ship was beautiful in a terrible way. Its hull was black, so black that it seemed to drink in the starlight around it. Sharp angles and hard edges gave it the appearance of a weapon rather than a vessel. There were no visible windows, no markings, no signs of the beings who had built it. It simply existed, moving forward with a purpose that needed no explanation. "Ambassador," her communications officer said, a young Korvath male with trembling hands, "we have exhausted all standard protocols. The vessel does not respond to any frequency we transmit on." Selene nodded slowly. "Then we will try something different." She walked to the main console and began inputting commands herself. Mathematical primes, the universal language of intelligent beings. Simple sequences that any species with the capacity for space travel would recognize. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. She transmitted them on every channel available. A long moment. Nothing happened, and the alien vessel responded. A single burst of data, compressed and dense, flooded into their systems The communications officer's console exploded in a shower of sparks. Every screen on the bridge flickered and died. Emergency lights activated. Bathing everything in red? What happened? Silane demanded. The officer was shaking as he tried to restore his systems. The data packet. Ambassador, it was too complex. Our computers could not process it. They crashed trying to decode it. Silane felt a chill run down her spine. The Concorde's computers were the most advanced in known space. They could process information faster than thought, could decode languages that had been dead for millennia, and this single transmission had overwhelmed them completely. Can you recover anything from the data? She asked as the officer worked frantically. Fragments only, Ambassador. Most of it is corrupted beyond recovery. Show me what you have. A damaged screen flickered to life, displaying broken symbols and scattered characters. Most of it was meaningless noise. But in the center of the chaos, a few words had been decoded. They were in an ancient script, one that Silane recognized from her studies long ago, a language that should not exist anymore, a language that had been erased from history. We remember. That was all it said. 2 words that meant nothing and everything at once. Silane stared at those words until her eyes burned. Then she turned to her pilot. Get us out of here. Full speed back to the fleet. But Ambassador, our mission is over, Silane said. And there was something in her voice that silenced all argument. We need to reach the council immediately. The diplomatic cruiser turned and fled, its escort following close behind. The alien vessel did not pursue it, simply continued its steady advance toward the heart of Concorde space. Hours later, Silane stood before the Council of 12 in the great chamber on the capital world of Thesser. Prime representatives from every member species sat in their designated places, their faces displaying varying degrees of concern and skepticism. High Admiral Vetheran stood beside her, his 4 eyes fixed on the assembled leaders. You claim this vessel comes from the Forbidden Zone, Councillor Drethane of the Corvath said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. That region has been sealed for 3,000 years. Nothing could have survived there. And yet something has, Silana replied. Something that ignored our weapons, crashed our computers with a single transmission, and continues to advance despite all our efforts to communicate. What do you propose we do? Asked Councillor Myrtle of the Veleth, her own species. Surrender to an unknown threat simply because it does not respond to our hails. I propose we learn what we are dealing with before we act rashly, Silane said. I request access to the founding archives, the sealed records from 3,000 years ago. A murmur ran through the chamber. The founding archives were sacred. They contained the original agreements that had created the Concorde, along with records of what had come before. Most of those records had been locked away and declared forbidden to access. The archives are sealed for good reason, Councillor Drethon said. The founders determined that certain knowledge was too dangerous to preserve. Then perhaps they should have destroyed it completely, Silane replied. Because I believe that knowledge is directly relevant to what approaches us now. She activated a display and showed the council the fragments she had recovered from the alien transmission. We remember. Councillor Myrtle read aloud. What does it mean? I do not know, Silane admitted. But I intend to find out. This is absurd. A new voice declared. Councillor Vethenak of the Siren rose from his seat, his tall, thin body swaying with agitation. We are the Galactic Concorde. We command 4,000 warships. We have maintained peace for 30 centuries through strength, not through fear of the unknown. I say we destroy this vessel and be done with it. Several councillors voiced their agreement. High Admiral, Councillor Drethon said. Turning to Vethorn, what is your assessment? Vethorn was quiet for a moment. My assessment is that we know nothing about this enemy. We do not know where they come from. We do not know what they want. We do not know what weapons they possess or how many more ships they might have. Ambassador Silane is correct that we should gather information before we act. And if they attack while we gather information, Counselor Vethanak demanded, then we will respond with everything we have. Vethorin said, but I will not start a war against an enemy I do not understand. That is how civilizations fall. The council debated for hours in the end. They reached a compromise. Elaine would be granted limited access to the founding archives to search for relevant information. Meanwhile, Vethorin would mobilize the full Concord fleet as a precaution, and if the alien vessel made any hostile move, they would destroy it without hesitation. Cillian left the chamber and made her way to the archives deep beneath the Capitol building. The corridors grew older as she descended, carved from stone rather than built from metal. Finally, she reached a massive door sealed with locks that had not been opened in millennia. The access code she had been given worked. The door groaned and slowly swung open. Inside was a vast chamber filled with storage, containers, and ancient data crystal. Siln began her search. It took her most of the night, but finally she found what she was looking for: a single data crystal, marked with a symbol that had been erased from all public records. She loaded it into a reader, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Images of ships, primitive but recognizable images of families, of children, of beings who looked strange, and soft but undeniably alive images of those ships being surrounded by Concord vessels, images of weapons, fire, images of destruction, and a single word repeated over and over in the ancient records, a word that had been forbidden to speak for 3,000 years. Human, the founding members of the Concord, had found them. They had found their colony ships, unarmed and filled with hope, and they had destroyed them all. Every single one. They had committed genocide against a species that had done nothing wrong except exist. And now, 3,000 years later, something had come from the void where those humans were supposed to have died. Something that remembered. Xylene dropped the data crystal. Her hands were shaking. What have we done? She whispered to the empty chamber, and somewhere in the darkness of space, the unknown vessel continued its advance. The Sirith corridor was the only path to the Sur Prime. Ancient gravitational fields from dead stars made it impossible to approach the capital world from any other direction. For 3,000 years, this had been the Concord's greatest defensive advantage. Any enemy that wished to threaten the heart of their civilization would have to pass through this narrow channel of space, and High Admiral Vethorin intended to make that passage impossible. He stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance and watched his ships arrive from every corner of Concord, space dreadnoughts that dwarfed small moons, their hulls bristling with weapons capable of cracking planets, carriers that held thousands of smaller attack craft in their bellies, ready to swarm any enemy with overwhelming numbers. Destroyers built for speed and violence, able to strike and vanish before retaliation could come. Siege platforms that could sustain bombardment for months without rest. 4,000 warships, representing 12 species and 30 centuries of military advancement. It was the greatest concentration of firepower in galactic history. Nothing could stand against it. Nothing ever had. Final positioning complete. High Admiral Officer Kethril reported, her voice steady now. All fleet elements are in place. Vethorin nodded. Show me the formation. The main display shifted to reveal a veiled shown of formation. The main display shifted to reveal a sona tactical map of the corridor. The Concord fleet had arranged itself in a layered defense. The fastest destroyers formed the outer ring, ready to intercept and harry any approaching enemy behind them. The carriers had launched their attack craft, creating a swarm of smaller vessels that numbered in the tens of thousands. The dreadnoughts held the center line, Their massive weapons aimed at the single approach vector, and at the rear, the siege platforms waited, ready to add their firepower to the barrage. Any change in the target's behavior? Vethorin asked. None, sir. The alien vessel maintains its course and speed. It will reach the outer defensive perimeter in approximately 2 hours. 2 hours, 2 hours until the moment of truth, Veth. Aran had spent the night. Preparing for this battle, he had studied the sensor data from the alien ship dozens of times. He had run simulations using every combat scenario the Concord's military computers could generate, and every simulation ended the same way: total victory for the Concorde. The alien vessel was a lone one ship against 4,000. The mathematics of the situation were simple. Even if this unknown enemy possessed weapons beyond anything they had seen before, even if it could destroy 100 ships or 1,000, it could not possibly stand against the full might of 12 civilizations. Numbers would win. Numbers always won. But despite all his logical analysis, despite all his confidence in the fleet under his command, Vethorin could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Ambassador Silene had sent him a message before the communications blackout, a message he had not shared with anyone. She had told him about the founding archives, but what she had found there about the humans, Vethorin was old enough to remember the stories his grandfather had told him, passed down through generation stories about a species from a distant region of space, a species that had been soft and weak but possessed an unusual quality. They called it determination. They called it stubbornness. They called it the refusal to accept defeat. His grandfather had spoken of these beings with something that sounded almost like admiration and something that sounded almost like fear. They were not like us, his grandfather had said. When we faced impossible odds, we calculated our chances and retreated if necessary. They did not. They fought even when logic said they could not win. They died even when surrender was an option, and sometimes against all reason. They won. The founders of the Concorde had decided that such a species was too dangerous to let live, and so they had made sure the humans would never threaten anyone, or so they had believed. A tone sounded on the bridge. High Admiral, the communications officer announced. Incoming transmission from the Council. Put it through. Councillor Drethan's face appeared on the display. Admiral Vethorin, the Council has reached a decision. You are authorized to use whatever force is necessary to stop the alien vessel. If it will not surrender, destroy it. Understood. Councillor, there is more, Drethan said, and his expression was troubled. Ambassador Silane has presented us with information from the founding archives. We are aware of what this vessel may represent. This makes it even more important that it be eliminated. Whatever this thing is, whatever it wants, it cannot be allowed to reach Thesser Prime. The Concorde depends on you. Admiral, the transmission ended. Vethorin stood in silence for a long moment. Whatever it wants, that was the question. Was it not? If the alien vessel wanted revenge, it could have attacked immediately. If it wanted war, it could have brought more than one ship. Instead, it came alone, moving slowly, giving them time to prepare. It was almost as if it wanted them to gather their forces, almost as if it wanted them to face it at full strength. High Admiral, Catherall said, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. The vessel has reached the outer perimeter. It is not slowing down. Vethorin straightened his uniform. All ships, battle stations, weapons free on my command. Across the fleet, alarms sounded and crews rushed to their positions. Weapon systems hummed to life, shields activated, creating invisible barriers of energy around every vessel. The alien ship continued forward, past the outer ring of destroyers without pause. The small fast ships fell into position behind it, ready to strike at its Engines, it passed the swarm of attack craft without deviation 50,000 smaller. Vessels surrounded it like insects around a predator. It passed the line of carriers without acknowledgement, massive. Ships that could crush it with sheer mass alone watched it go by, and then it stopped. The alien vessel came to a complete halt directly in front of the dreadnought line, directly in front of the Eternal Vigilance, directly in front of Vethoran himself. Open a channel, the Admiral commanded. Channel open. Sir, Vethoran spoke clearly and firmly. Unknown vessel, you have entered Concord space without permission and ignored all attempts at communication. You are now surrounded by the full military force of the Galactic Concord. This is your final warning. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. You have 30 seconds to comply. Silence. The bridge crew held their breath. 20 seconds passed. 10 seconds. 5 and then the alien ship responded. Every screen on every ship in the fleet flickered, and a voice spoke. It was neither male nor female. It was neither angry nor calm. It simply was. Like the void itself had learned to speak. You have made your choice. The transmission ended. Vethoran felt ice form in his chest. All ships, he said. And his voice did not waver, even though everything inside him screamed that something was wrong. Open fire. 4,000 warships unleashed their fury plasma. Lances that burned hotter than stars streaked toward the alien vessel. Kinetic accelerators launched projectiles. At a fraction of light speed, antimatter torpedoes spiraled through the void, each one carrying enough destructive power to level a city. Beam weapons, missile swarms, gravity bombs, particle cannons, everything the Concord had developed over 30 centuries of military advancement, all of it aimed at a single target. The barrage struck, and the alien vessel shimmered. The weapons passed through it, every single one, as if the ship were a ghost, as if it existed in a different reality entirely. The projectiles continued on, some striking Concord ships on the opposite side of the formation. The beams dissipated into empty space. The torpedoes detonated harmlessly in the void, and the alien vessel remained exactly where it was, untouched, unharmed, unimpressed. Silence fell across the fleet. That is impossible. Kethril, whispered. Varan gripped the railing in front of him until his knuckles turned white. All ships, prepare for concentrated fire. Target their engines, their weapons, anything that looks vital. Find a weakness. But before the order could be carried out, the alien vessel began to move, and everything changed. The alien vessel moved like nothing Vethoran had ever seen. One moment it was stationary before the dreadnought line. The next it was among them, accelerating to speeds that should have torn any ship apart the Concord's fastest destroyers could reach. Impressive velocities given enough time and distance. This ship moved as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions, as if space itself bent to let it pass. Track it, Vethoran shouted. All weapons, track and fire. But tracking was impossible. Vessel wove through the fleet like water through stone. It passed between dreadnoughts that tried desperately to bring their massive guns to bear it, danced around carriers that attempted to ram it with their bulkheads, slipped through formations that had been designed to trap and destroy any enemy, and then it began to fight back. The first weapon discharge was a beam of light so bright that it overloaded every sensor that tried to record it. It struck the dreadnought unbreakable. Well, directly amidships, the shields did not flicker. They did not weaken. Gradually, they simply ceased to exist. The beam continued through the hull as if the meters of reinforced armor were made of paper. It exited the other side of the ship in a spray of molten metal and frozen atmosphere. The unbreakable will. A vessel that had been designed to withstand planetary bombardment broke in half. Its two sections drifted apart. secondary explosions rippling along its length. 12,000 crew members died in less than a second. Veteran watched it happen and felt his mind struggle to accept what his eyes were showing him. All ships. Evasive maneuvers, he commanded. Scatter and regroup at secondary positions. But the fleet could not scatter. Something was holding them in place. High Admiral Cathrall screamed. Spatial anchors. The alien vessel has deployed some kind of gravitational lock. Our engines are operating at full power, but we cannot move. Veteran looked at his tactical display across the formation. Ships struggled against invisible chains. Their engines burned at maximum thrust. But they remained exactly where they were, wrapped helpless prey. The alien vessel struck again. This time, it targeted a carrier. The pride of Thesser, another beam of impossible light, the carriers. Shields held for perhaps a tenth of a second longer than the dreadnoughts had, then they failed. The beam carved through the ship from bow to stern. The pride of Thesser did not explode, it simply came apart, its structure collapsing, as if the beam had severed every connection that held it together. 20,000 crew Gonevrith watched his tactical display as ship after ship went dark. The alien vessel moved through the fleet with terrible efficiency. It did not waste shots. It did not miss. Every beam found its target. Every target died. The attack craft tried to swarm it, hoping that sheer numbers might accomplish what heavy weapons could not. The alien vessel released something into the void. Thousands of smaller projectiles. Barely visible on sensors, they moved even faster than the main ship. They found the attack craft and detonated, not with explosions, but with pulses of energy that disrupted every system they touched. Fighters went dark and drifted. Bombers lost power and became tombs. The swarm that had numbered 50,000 was reduced to scattered debris in moments. Admiral, the communications officer said, his voice breaking, I am receiving emergency transmissions from across the fleet. They are requesting orders. They are requesting help. What orders could Vethorn give? What help could he send? He had assembled the greatest military force in galactic history, and it was dying around him. How long? He asked quietly. Sir, how long has it been since the engagement began? Cathrall checked her console with shaking hands. 2 minutes, High Admiral. 2 minutes and 12 seconds. 2 minutes and 2 minutes. The alien vessel had destroyed over 500 ships in 2 minutes. It had killed hundreds of thousands of crew members in 2 minutes. It had proven that everything the Concorde believed about its own power was a lie. The vessel continued its work as siege platform, the largest in the fleet, tried to bring its planetary-scale weapons to bear. The alien ship simply appeared beside it. One moment it was on the other side of the formation, the next it was there. As if distance meant nothing. A different weapon this time, not a beam but a pulse. The siege platform collapsed inward on itself, crushed by gravitational forces that should not have been possible to generate. A sphere of compressed matter was all that remained. Dreadnought Eternal Justice attempted to self-destruct, hoping to take the alien vessel with it. The explosion was massive, a miniature sun blooming in the darkness. The alien ship emerged from the fire without a scratch, without even a mark on its dark hull. 3 minutes now. The fleet was in chaos. Ships that could move tried to flee, their crews abandoning all discipline in their desperation to escape. Ships that were still anchored fired wildly, their weapons striking each other as often as they struck the enemy commanders. Screamed orders that no one followed. Crews abandoned their posts and ran for escape pods that would never save them. Vethorn stood motionless on his bridge. He had stopped giving orders. There were no orders that could help. He simply watched as everything he had built, everything the Concorde had built, was systematically erased. High Admiral, Cathrall said, the vessel is approaching our position. Vethorn looked up through the viewing window. He could see it now, the alien ship, moving slowly, deliberately taking its time. It had destroyed most of the fleet already. only a few hundred ships remained, and those were either crippled or fleeing the Eternal. Vigilance was the last dreadnought still intact, the last symbol of Concord power. The alien vessel stopped directly in front of them, close enough that Vethorin could see details on its hull, close enough that he could make out what looked like writing, symbols in a language he did not recognize. 4 minutes, Kethril whispered. 4 minutes since the battle began. 4 minutes, the greatest military force in galactic history had lasted 4 minutes. View screen flickered, and a new transmission began, the same voice as before. Neither angry nor triumphant, simply cold, simply final. We remember what you did to the colony ships. Images appeared on the screen, old images. Ancient by human standards, but preserved with perfect clarity, ships that were primitive but beautiful. Built with hope and dreams, families visible through viewing windows. Children playing in corridors, and then Concord vessels surrounding them, and then weapons fire, and then death. We remember the faces of our children as your weapons tore through their nurseries. More images, a little girl with brown hair and bright eyes, laughing at something off-screen. Same ship, moments later. Burning in the void, we remember the calls for mercy that you ignored. Audio now, mixed with the images, voices begging, pleading, promising anything if only they would be spared, and the response from the Concord, commander of that ancient fleet: eliminate them all. Leave no survivors. We have been patient, the voice continued. We have watched you for 3,000 years. We have seen you grow comfortable. We have seen you forget what you did. We have seen you tell yourselves that you are the guardians of peace, the protectors of civilization. A pause. That patience is over. Vethorin found his voice at last. What do you want? He asked. Revenge. You have it. The fleet is destroyed. The Concord is broken. What more can you take from us? The alien vessel was silent for a moment. Then the voice spoke one final time. We want you to remember. The beam struck the eternal vigilance. Viren had one moment to think of his grandfather's stories. One moment to understand that some enemies could not be calculated. Some enemies could not be measured. Some enemies simply refused to lose. And then there was light, and then there was nothing. The alien vessel hung alone in a field of debris around it. The wreckage of 4,000 ships drifted in the eternal cold. The greatest fleet ever assembled had lasted exactly 4 minutes, and somewhere in the depths of that dark angular hull, someone was watching, someone was remembering, and someone was not yet finished. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. It began as rumors, impossible stories that no one believed. A single ship had destroyed the Concord fleet. A single ship had killed 4 million crew members. A single ship had done in 4 minutes what no enemy had accomplished in 3,000 years. Then the sensor recordings arrived. Ships that had escaped the massacre carried with them footage of the battle, footage that was broadcast across every network, seen by every species, shared in every language, and the rumors became truth, and the truth became terror on Nessa Prime. The Council of 12, collapsed Councilor Drethon, was found dead in his chambers. His own weapon in his hand, he had chosen to face his own judgment rather than wait for what was coming. Others tried to flee, booking passage on private vessels to distant colonies where they hoped the alien ship would not find them. But where could they run? The Concord had no military anymore. The fleet that had protected them was debris floating in the Sirith. Corridor Ambassador Silane watched the chaos from her office in the diplomatic quarter. She had tried to warn them. She had told them what she found in the archives. They had chosen to fight anyway. Now there was nothing left to fight with her. Communications console chimed a priority message from the Central Observatory. She opened it and felt her blood turn to ice. The alien vessel had left the Sirith corridor it was not heading for Thesser. Prime, it was heading everywhere along range. Sensors showed it moving from system to system, approaching the homeworlds of every Concord species, not attacking, just arriving, just watching, just letting them know that it could do whatever it wanted. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. What did they want? Selene whispered to herself. She had asked that question 100 times since the battle. Revenge was the obvious answer, but if revenge was their goal, why had they not destroyed Thesser Prime already? Why had they not begun the Vendi's systematic elimination of everyone who had descended from those who had murdered their ancestors? Answer came 3 days after the destruction of the fleet. Every communication device in the galaxy activated. Simultaneously, every screen, every speaker, every holographic projector, all of them showing the same thing: the alien vessel, hanging in space against a backdrop of stars and a figure standing on what appeared to be a command bridge. It was the first time anyone had seen one of them. The being was smaller than most Concord species, with soft skin and a shade of brown, and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. 2 arms, 2 legs, a face that could almost be called gentle, if not for the cold fire that burned behind its gaze. A human after 3,000 years. A human stood before them, and when it spoke, its voice was the same one that had delivered the final message to High Admiral Vethorin. Citizens of the Galactic Concord, it said, "My name is not important. What I represent is, I am the last captain of the last human warship. I am the final result of 3,000 years of waiting, watching, and building." The human paused. "Your founders tried to erase us from existence. They found our colony ships, unarmed and helpless, filled with families seeking a new home. And they destroyed them all. Men, women, and children. Murdered because your ancestors were afraid of what we might become." Images appeared alongside the human. The same footage that Selene had found in the archives. The colony ships, the faces of the dead. The moment of annihilation. They thought they had succeeded. They returned to their homes and celebrated their victory over a defenseless enemy. They built their Concord on the graves of our children and told themselves they were the protectors of peace. The human's expression did not change, but they missed something. Deep in the void, hidden in a region of space they had declared forbidden, a handful of survivors clung to life. They had nothing but their grief and their determination, and they swore an oath that would be passed down through every generation that followed. We would never forget. We would never forgive. And one day, we would return. For 3,000 years, we watched you. We learned your languages, your customs, your technologies. We studied your weaknesses, and we built something new. Something that combined everything we had learned with everything we had lost. We became patient because patience was all we had. And now that patience has ended, the human stepped forward, closer to whatever camera was recording the message. You expected us to come with fleets. You expected us to wage war as you understand it. You were wrong. We did not come to conquer. We did not come to rule. We came to deliver a message. You are not safe. You have never been safe. Every moment you exist. You exist because we allow it. Every breath you take. You take because we have not decided to take it from you. Your military is gone. Your power is an illusion. And there is nothing you can do to change this. But we are not like you. We do not murder the helpless. We do not destroy those who cannot fight back. We remember what it felt like to be the victims. And we will not become what you were. So instead, we give you a choice. You can try to rebuild your fleet. You can try to hunt us down. You can try to finish what your ancestors started. If you do this, we will return. And next time, we will not stop with your military. We will end everything you have built, everything you have become. We will erase you as completely as you tried to erase us. Or you can learn. You can look at what you did 3,000 years ago and understand that it was wrong. You can teach your children the truth about how your civilization was founded. You can remember the faces of the humans you killed and carry that memory forward. Not as a burden, but as a lesson. The choice is yours. The human turned as if to leave, then stopped. One final thing. I know some of you will call this terrorism. I know some of you will say we are the villains, that we had no right to destroy your fleet, that we should have come in peace. A thin smile crossed the human's face. We did come in peace. 3,000 years ago, we came with open hands and hopeful hearts. And you showed us what you do to those who come in peace. Remember that. The next time you encounter something you do not understand, something weak, something different, remember this day. Remember what it feels like to be helpless. Remember the fear you feel right now, and choose better than your ancestors did. The transmission ended across the galaxy. Billions of beings sat in silence. The Concorde, as they knew it, was over. Military that had protected them was gone, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, a single ship waited to see what they would do next in the months that followed. The 12 species of the Concorde struggled to find a new path. Some wanted revenge, demanded that new fleets be built, new weapons developed, but others remembered the humans' words. They remembered the faces of the dead children, and they began to ask questions that had not been asked in 3,000 years. Why had the founders done what they did? What gave them the right? And what kind of civilization had been built on such a foundation? Ambassador Selene became the voice of those who wanted change. She published the contents of the founding archives for all to see. She led the effort to build memorials on every Concorde world, monuments to the humans who had been killed, and slowly, painfully, the galaxy began to transform. The new Concorde was different. It was smaller, weaker, more humble, but it was also honest. Its children learned the truth about their history. Its leaders swore oaths to never repeat the sins of the past, and when new species were discovered in the centuries that followed, they were greeted not with fear, but with welcome. A human ship was never seen again. It had delivered its message and vanished into the void that had sheltered the survivors for 3,000 years, but everyone knew it was still out. They're watching, waiting, remembering, and in the end, that was enough. The galaxy had learned to fear what humans could become, but more importantly, it had learned to respect what humans chose not to do. They could have destroyed everything. They could have become the very thing they hated instead. They gave the galaxy a chance to be better, and that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.